Good morning, County Council.
Good morning, Board.
We'll join in the singing of O Canada, or humming of O Canada. I think it's the right way to say it now, isn't it? Good morning, County Council.
Good morning, Board.
We'll join in the singing of O Canada, or humming of O Canada. I think it's the right way to say it now, isn't it? Good morning, County Council.
Good morning, Board.
We'll join in the singing of O Canada, or humming of O Canada. I think.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
My apologies to the tech people at the back. We'll stay standing and observe a moment of silence in memory of our colleague and friend, Councillor Rob Potter. Thank you very much. You may be seated. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Councillor Mackey,
Present.
Councillor Gamble,
Present.
Councillor Burley,
Present.
Councillor Carlton, Councillor McQueen,
Present.
Councillor Desai sends his regrets, Councillor Little, Councillor Patterson, Warden Hicks,
Here.
Councillor Clumpus, Councillor Keaveney, Councillor Body, Councillor O'Leary, Councillor Woodbury, Councillor Millen, Councillor Soever, Councillor Sampson, Councillor Robinson, Councillor Hutchinson. Thank you, Mr. Warden. We have all members of council with alternates, Councillor Little and Councillor Sampson.
Thank you very much. We'll turn next to the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge with respect the history, spirituality, and culture of the Anishinaabe, the Six Nations of the Grand River, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat, Wyandot peoples, on whose traditional territories we gather and whose ancestors signed treaties with our ancestors. We recognize also the Métis and Inuit, whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. May we all, as treaty people, live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship with all of its diverse peoples. Okay, Council, is there any declaration of interest, pecuniary or otherwise? I see no hands, and I would just say if one arises during the course of the meeting, I would ask you to declare it at that time. We're on to item 7A. We're looking at the County Council and Committee of the Whole minutes, which are dated November 12th, 2021. I'm looking for a mover and seconder. Moved by Councillor Mackey, seconded, by Councillor Robinson. Oh, Hutchison, my apologies. Is there any discussion? Councillor Soever.
Yes, Mr. Warden, I'd like to pull item CW 17321, which was the notice of motion brought by Councillor Desai for further discussion. And also item C 183-21, which was the capital projects purchasing approval. Those two items, please.
My apologies. Why don't we start with the notice of motion item? So I guess we have two routes that we can proceed. One is that we have a formal motion to pull the items, or you can ask some questions about those two items. Oh.
The first item I'd like pulled because I'd like to amend that motion. But the second item is just for discussion.
My apologies. Why don't we deal with the second item then, and then we'll deal with the notice of motion item. So you have a question on the second item. Oops.
Yes, on the purchasing program, and we authorize council to go and prepare the RFPs. I've since been advised at our agricultural advisory committee meeting in the Blue Mountains, and then with subsequent follow-up with staff, that there are a number of comments that were submitted to the county with regards to the resurfacing of Gray Road 2, which have gone as of yet unaddressed. So I'm just a bit concerned that we're gonna put out an RFP without having addressed the comments not only from residents, including former warden Duncan McKinley, and in our staff on this project, with some what I thought were pretty good suggestions for minor modifications, which would make it a much better project. But there's yet to be any response on those, as I understand. So I'm just wondering if staff had any comment on that, because this is a county road, so it is a county responsibility, yet the impacts are felt in the lower tier for sure. It's a very busy road. It has to deal with bicycles, people stopping to take pictures of the Beaver Valley, make phone calls. They pull over because they're entering the Great Void south of there without any cell phone service, and people who know. So it does have a number of issues that were brought to the attention of staff, and I'm just wondering, I just want to make sure those are addressed before we go out to tender, which I think is going to be in January 6th.
Perhaps we'll give Mr. Hoy, you're looking, Randy, to respond to that?
I can start the response, and if we need any further details, of course, turn it over to our Director of Transportation, Pat Hoy. So thank you for raising those, Councilor Soever. We are aware that there's some comments and suggested improvements to the design. Ultimately, we're trying to come up with a design that supports all road users from a safety perspective within and around the Ravenna area. And so we want to, we're happy, of course, to work with town staff to look at some of the comments and questions that have been raised and make any adjustments that are required to those suggested or proposed road improvements prior to releasing the tender.
Anything further, Councillor Soever?
No, I think that's fine. You know, I'm appreciative of staff's efforts in this regard.
Okay, we'll deal with the next item. I'm assuming you'll move that we pull the notice of motion by Councillor Desai. And I need a seconder for that. Councillor Sampson, thank you. Councillor Soever, you have the floor. Okay, so all in favor of that, of pulling the item? If you could raise your hand.
I see some questions here. Through you, Mr. Warden, the motion on the floor is just to pull this item to vote on it separately. If that passes, then the original motion will go on the floor, moved and seconded appropriately, and then further any amendments that come from that. So you are just voting on whether you're wanting to pull it from the minutes or not.
So back to that question, all those in favor of pulling the item? That carries. Councillor Soever, you have the floor. So we're voting on the main package, right? My apologies. I was treating this as a motion to amend, but it's not. So we're now voting on the main motion, which is to approve the Committee of the Whole minutes dated November 12th, 2021. That's the main motion. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? That carries. Thank you very much. So we will now deal with the item that we pulled. And Councillor Soever, you have the floor. Thought we already.
This original motion,
Yes.
now is being pulled and voted on separately. So now it stands on its own until we need it moved and seconded.
The one that's been pulled.
Yes.
Right, okay. Okay, so we'll get a mover and a seconder to deal with the pulled item. Right? Is that a question, Councillor Body, or you're moving? No, not moving. I'm confused. Are you moving? Okay, and I need a seconder. Councillor Mackey. Okay. So there we have it on the floor and speakers to the item now. Councillor Soever.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Warden. Yes, so the motion, it's a great motion, but I would just like to move an amendment that we include a review of our public process, public access and public participation processes as part of that governance review. The original motion talks about the governance review, and then it says various governance options, including the term of warden, direct versus indirect election, meeting structure, and weighted voting. And you know, I think one of the things we don't have here is a lot of public participation. And I think, you know, we certainly in the town of Blue Mountains, and I know some other municipalities as well, have introduced a public comment period, which allows people to appear and address the council on matters that are before us without going through a formal deputation process. And we found that, you know, it's not used a lot, but in instances where something does come up, and we've had some very good suggestions come to council through that process. So when our Town of Blue Mountains Council met on Monday, on November 22nd, I always give a briefing on what's happened at county, and this governance review came up. And I think particularly because of the last item that I pulled, there was some discussion, and council passed a resolution at the Blue Mountains that council of the Town of the Blue Mountains directs town staff to request that Grey County include a review of its public access and participation processes as part of the Grey County governance review. And I think this would be most helpful in that the more public engagement we can get, the more understanding there will be as to the role of the county and the importance of the county. And I think if we lose touch with our public, we run the risk of being considered irrelevant. So that's why I'm proposing just adding to the motion that where it says a meeting structure, weighted voting, as well as a review of its public access and participation processes as part of the Grey County governance review that we approved last time. Thank you, Mr. Warden.
Thank you, sir. I guess I'm going to ask for some input here from you. Is this germane, do you believe, to the original motion that was brought by Councillor Desai, or does this require a separate notice of motion? Okay, so our clerk has determined that it's appropriate to be dealt with as an amendment. Madam CAO. Thank goodness I have you beside me here. So it's moved, the amendment is being moved by Councillor Soever and seconded by Councillor Sampson. Okay, Madam CAO, your turn.
Thank you and good morning, Council. Certainly, we can include some discussion of this this topic in the report that Heather is working on now. I think one of the things that we do want to think carefully about, though, is the role of yourselves as county councillors and the opportunity that you have as a council, as we've seen this morning, where you're bringing information forward that, you know, has the support of your municipality and your municipal colleagues. So I guess the caution that I would see is that we wouldn't want to put ourselves in a situation where this was somehow undermining or taking away from the role that all of you play when you bring information forward to us. So I think the county councillor role comes with a lot of responsibility in that regard. You do bring your concerns and ideas forward to this table on behalf of the communities that you represent. And we just wouldn't want to do anything to minimize that responsibility. But certainly we'll take a look at this and see if we can have, I think, a better sense of what's happening in other places and how well that's working.
Any other comment on the amendment proposed by Councillor Soever? Councillor Soever.
Yes, and I think I recognize the CEO's concerns, and I think this highlights another governance issue is that when we are here at county council, our responsibility is to act in the best interest of the county. And I think in proposing this amendment, I think that's what I'm doing, even though our council did pass a resolution to that effect. But it's a fact that as county councillors, we can't be directed how to vote by our local council. I mean, that's a prime rule of having two levels of government, is that when we're here, we wear our county hat, and when we're at our local municipality. So we wear our local municipality hat. So I think, taking direction from our call, like having the comments flow through to the local council, and then having local council lobby the representative that's here, then I think we're going into dangerous waters where when we're here, we're going to be representing the interests of our individual communities rather than the county as a whole. And so I think that's why it's important that comments, like we've had several instances that I'm aware of, like the lights at Crosswinds and Gray Road 19, where county wished that the citizens would direct their comments to the local council, and the local council would relay those comments to the county. But then that means that in terms of governance, we as county council members would be reflecting the views of our community only and not the interests of the county as a whole. So it's something I know we all struggle with when we're here because we're mayors and deputy mayors. But I think given, the oath we take and the rules around which hat we wear when we're here, I think it's better that the residents have as much communication to come directly to us as county councillor members and county staff rather than to flow their comments through the local municipality. Thank you.
Thank you. I do not see any further hands. Oh, Councilor Carlton.
I'm just wondering if we could have the amendment read out to us, just so we can be clear on what it is. Thank you.
For sure.
That the motion be amended to also include consideration of public access and participation processes as part of the governance information report.
Any other discussion? If not, then I'm going to call the question on just the amendment. So all those in favor of the amendment proposed by Councillor Soever? And all those opposed? Okay.
Okay, this is a recorded vote for the amendment to the notice of motion. Councillor Mackey. Sorry, just say your vote and I will repeat that.
In favor.
Councillor Mackey is in favor. Councillor Gamble. Councillor Gamble is opposed. Councillor Burley. Councillor Burley is opposed. Councillor Carlton. Councillor Carlton is in favor. Councillor McQueen.
In favor.
Councillor McQueen is in favor. Councillor Little. Councillor Little is in favor. Councillor Patterson. Councillor Patterson is opposed. Warden Hicks. No, I have it. You just have to tell me.
In favor.
Thank you. Warden Hicks is in favor. Councillor Clumpus. Councillor Clumpus is in favor. Councillor Keaveney. Councillor Keaveney is in favor. Counselor Body. Counselor Body is opposed. Counselor O'Leary. Counselor O'Leary is opposed. Counselor Woodbury. Counselor Woodbury is opposed. Counselor Millen. Counselor Millen is opposed. Counselor Soever. Counselor Soever is in favor. Counselor Sampson. Counselor Sampson is in favor. Counselor Robinson. Counselor Robinson is in favor. Counselor Hutchinson.
In favor.
Counselor Hutchinson is in favor. The motion passes 56-34. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Okay, so we're back to the main motion now, which is the, right, as amended, that was moved by, originally by Councillor Desai. Any discussion, further discussion on the main motion? Put it up just so everyone is clear. So we need a mover for the main motion as amended. Moved by Councillor Keaveney, seconded by Councillor Soever. I think it's time to call the question. Do we have the main motion? Does anyone need to see it? Anyone need clarity on the main motion? No? Then I'll call the question. All those in favor of the main motion? Oh. Are there any opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much. Wow, we got one item done. Okay, we're on to item 7B now. The Committee of the Whole closed meeting minutes dated November 12th, 2021, moved by Councillor Robinson, seconded by Councillor Woodbury. I guess we'll, unless if you want to have discussion, we'd have to go into closed session, but I'll call the question if no one has questions. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Item 7C is the Development Charges Steering Committee minutes dated November 15th, 2021, and staff overview of the steering committee recommendations. Moved by Councillor Milne, seconded by Councillor Hutchison. Any discussion there? Okay. Andy?
Good morning, Council. Just going to provide a presentation just to provide an overview of the items that were discussed by the DC Steering Committee, as well as identifying some areas that staff are recommending some revisions to the motion. Just pull up that slide presentation here. Should I get that from the website too? I don't see it. Just see it Business Enterprise Center. Oh, wait. Oh, here it is. Found it. Great. Okay. So on November 15th, Hempson Consulting provided a presentation to the DC Steering Committee regarding a number of policy items that required direction from the steering committee and ultimately required direction from council. As part of the discussion, the DC Steering Committee recommended that council adopt the development charge bylaws, subject to the following items that you'll see there listed on the screen. And I'm going to go through those in further detail in terms of the direction that was provided by the steering committee. So the first matter was with respect to the residential development charge rates. The Development Charge Steering Committee recommends that the rates calculated by Hempson Consulting be fully implemented effective January 1st, 2022, as well as to keep the semi-detached units grouped with the single detached units, which is consistent with our current county development charge bylaws. The rates result in an average increase of approximately 17% compared to the current development charge rates. Just to provide some context, the construction price index that was released for the third quarter this year was just over 11%. which is a result of the significant increases that we've all been experiencing with respect to construction costs. So for comparison purposes, the current single and semi-attached development charge rate is just over $7,500. And the proposed development charge calculated rate based on the updated development charge capital program is just under $9,000. The Development Charges Steering Committee recommended that those semi-detached units remain with a single attached unit category, which again, as I noted, is consistent with the county's current development charge bylaws. It's also consistent with how the majority of the municipalities throughout Ontario have in their current development charges. The next item that's the DC Steering Committee recommended was with respect to non-residential rates. So just to provide some context in terms of some of the background information that was provided to the DC Steering Committee. So most governments throughout the province of Ontario, including some of our neighboring counties, have a development charge that is imposed at least to commercial development, and a number of them also apply a development charge to industrial development as well. Hemson did note that industrial development is sometimes exempted as an economic development incentive, which both Peterborough County and Oxford County provide. However, Simcoe County, Middlesex County, Dufferin County, and Wellington County apply a non-residential charge to both commercial and industrial developments. Hemson identified that the estimated revenue shortfall per year if non-residential charges were exempted totals just under $800,000 per year. So based on this, Hemson has calculated the non-residential rate to be $31.28 per square meter, just to provide some context as to what that could look like on the ground. So a 5,000 square foot building or a 465 square meter commercial or industrial building would result in a county development charge of just over $14,500. It's equivalent, that size is equivalent to the size of the Harvey Swiss Chalet here in Owen Sound. A 50,000 square foot commercial industrial building, which is about 4,645 square meters, would attract a county development charge of just over $145,000. So that's about the half size of the Walmart here in Owen Sound. So for example, a Walmart, if a new Walmart were to be created, it would attract a charge of just under $300,000. A 750 square meter on-farm diversified use, so those industrial shops in our rural areas, would attract a charge of about $23,500. So that just provides some context in terms of what a fully implemented non-residential charge would look like. So the Development Charge Steering Committee recommended that the non-residential development charge be phased in over a period of time. And there are a number of phase-in options that were discussed with the DC Steering Committee, and the recommendation was to discuss those further options with council today to receive direction on what's the preferred approach to phase in the non-residential charges. Staff have had further discussions, including with economic development staff. And given that we are still in a recovery period of the pandemic, and in order to allow developers and businesses time to adjust their pro formas to account for the new non-residential charge, staff are recommending that the non-res be phased in with 0% in the first year in 2022, and then increasing 25% each year starting in 2023, resulting in the full 100% non-res charge coming into effect in the last year of our 5-year bylaw, being in 2026. There are other phase-in options, of course, that council can consider, and those are highlighted in the slide deck as other options, and there's probably other countless options beyond that too. But staff are recommending that one particular option. The other item that the DC Steering Committee discussed was and recommended is keeping the 2020 changes that were made to the county development charges bylaws with respect to the deferral and conditional exemptions. So this would be continuing with the deferral and conditional exemptions for purpose-built rental housing, exempting nonprofit housing developments, providing or aligning with the Development Charge Act changes with respect to exempting additional dwelling units and secondary units, redevelopment credits for non-residential to residential conversions, as well as conditional exemptions for approved community improvement plan projects. Staff would continue to monitor the vacancy rates. And if the vacancy rates return to healthy levels, then these conditional exemptions could be reconsidered. However, as I mentioned, the steering committee is recommending that we continue that program until those vacancy rates return to healthy levels. In terms of other policy changes and policy direction that the DC Steering Committee recommended, first one was to allow for mixed use deferral and conditional exemptions for the residential portion associated with a purpose rental build housing. So for example, if we had a development where there was ground floor commercial that's proposed and residential apartment units above, the current wording in the county development charge bylaw wouldn't allow us to provide a deferral and conditional exemption to the residential apartments. So staff are recommending that we revise the wording in the development charge bylaws to allow for that residential portion to qualify for a deferral and conditional exemption. And this aligns with our collective planning policies and encourages mixed use developments. Another recommendation made by this DC Steering Committee was the Grey Gables redevelopment, and for that to remain excluded from the current proposed draft development charge background study. This is based on the fact that if Grey Gables were reintroduced, there would be no change to the development charge rates, as we are already maximizing the funding envelope with respect to the development charges for long-term care. The development charge capital program also must reflect council's intentions. And there are also legal considerations regarding updating the development charge background study within the required 60-day review period prior to council passing those development charge bylaws. If council does decide to move forward with the Grey Gables redevelopment project in the future, the DC bylaw can be amended within 1 year of the DC background study. And even following that initial year, the DC bylaw can be updated with a scoped development charge background study. Both of those pass would require a public meeting. And then the other matter discussed with the DC Steering Committee was preparing a consolidated version of the development charge background study and making that effective December 31st, 2021. Following further discussion with Hempson and legal, staff recommended the words effective December 31st, 2021 be removed in order to be consistent with the intent of the Development Charges Act. Essentially, the contents of the development charge background study should remain fairly intact with the DC background study that was provided for review and comment 60 days prior to council passing the development charge bylaws. If council approves the development charge bylaws on December 9th, 2021, for example, then 60 days prior is October 8th, which is the current date of our DC background study. So the recommendation would be that we keep that October 8th date to be consistent with the intent of the Development Charges Act. And that's something that's new that we, following discussions from the DC Steering Committee, we had some further discussions with Hempson Legal, and that's what staff are recommending in order to proceed. We will, of course, still work with Hempson to prepare a consolidated version of the DC background study, but the effective date essentially would be, we're recommending would be October 8th, 2021. So based on that, staff are recommending the following revisions to the motion from the DC Steering Committee. One is with respect to the phasing in of the non-residential rates. And as recommended, staff are recommending that we phase that in with 0% in 2022 and 25% in 2023, 50% 2024, 75 in 2025, and 100% in 2026. And then to remove effective December 31st, 2021 from the last bullet in the motion. Just to capture next steps, just so everyone's aware of what the next steps are and the plans are. Staff will work with Hempson to make the changes to development charges bylaws based on the direction we received from council today. The final draft DC bylaws will then come forward to the December 9th council meeting for consideration. Once the DC bylaws are approved, the notice of passing will be provided in accordance with the Development Charges Act. As noted, Hempson will provide that consolidated version of the DC background study, but remain in effect, effective date of October 8th. And staff will work with Hempson to also complete what's called a local servicing guideline, which is essentially any development or any capital improvements that are required or triggered by developments, specific developments, they would be the responsibility of the developer, not the responsibility with respect to the development charges. So, so they're recommending to come back with that guideline following the DC bylaw approval. And happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Randy. Any questions? Councillor Soever.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Warden. So at the Development Charges Committee meeting, we talked about the date of the report. And I think, you know, the important thing for council members here is that, you know, all these development charges are based on, you know, household size numbers and census data that dates back to 2016. So we know that new census data is coming out. So it was discussed that some municipalities do date their reports the day before the new development charges coming into effect, so that they have the greatest amount of time possible to make any updates based on what, you know, they receive and hear, you know, changes that might happen. So we are seeing a lot of change in Grey County. The new census data will be available sometime next year. So, you know, my intent in asking the question is, how late could we date this report, was to give us as a council time to make any changes that may occur due to changes in demographics indicated by the new census data. So we were advised as the Development Charges Committee that some municipalities do date their reports the day before the new charges come into effect, which in this case would be January 1st, 2022. So now we're hearing that that's not the advice we got at the Development Charges Committee was not accurate, or something has changed since then. So Randy, just wondering, what advice have we received, and do we have it in writing, the advice that we got to change that date, that we can't have December 31st in there? Because I think, you know, we should take advantage of anything we can. And we were distinctly told at the Development Charges Committee meeting by the consultant that some municipalities do date it. And then I recall the conversation. So it was decided that December 31st was the last date that we could legally date it. And now the implication is that we somehow have new advice since the meeting that it can't be December 31st. So do we have that advice? And perhaps I'd certainly like to see it.
So Randy, I'll let you answer, but I think we want to be careful because at some point we may want to go into closed session if we're going to be talking about legal advice obtained.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and thank you, Councilor Swever, for the question. Yeah, we did, of course, discuss this further with our county solicitor and with Hempson following the discussion with the DC Steering Committee. And upon, excuse me, review of the legislation, that's the recommendation at this stage, is that we keep the effective date as October 8th, which would be that 60-day period prior to council passing the development charge bylaws. If council requires further detail with respect to that, I think we would, as you indicated, Mr. Warden, we would have to go into closed session to discuss with respect to the details regarding that interpretation as it relates to some previous decisions that were made by through appeal challenges.
Councilor Soever, do you require anything more detailed, or anyone else around the horseshoe require anything more detailed, requiring us to go into closed session?
Yes, Mr. Warden, I just, for my own information, would like to see those appeal challenges, but I don't feel, you know, that's certainly public information and not solicitor advice. It would just be those references to those appeal challenges, and I'd be happy to receive those after the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anything further from anyone else? Did I see Councillor Keaveney first? No. Saw Councillor Carlton. Councillor Carlton, you go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. My recollection from that meeting was that Hempson was telling us some other municipalities use that date before the development charges would be enacted because the act itself is not super clear on the date that you have to use. But the 60 days prior to passing it is in effect. So that's why it would need to be October 8th. But he had said that other municipalities try it the other way and have gotten away with it so far. That's just my recollection of what was said the other day.
Okay, anything further from anyone on this point? I think we have to go back because there is, we should probably have a mover and seconder for the amendments. Okay, so yeah, so we had two amendments. One was the phasing in, the other one was with respect to the phasing in date. So if we could get a mover and seconder, we can deal with that first. So moved by Councillor Carlton, seconded by Councillor Robinson. Okay, we're now dealing with any discussion you want to have on the two amendments. Councillor Soever.
We split those two so that we can vote one way on one and one way on the other.
If the mover and seconder being Councillor Carlton and Robinson are okay dealing with the first bullet point being that the phased in approach for non-residential development charges with 0% in 22, 25% in 2023, 50% in 2024, 75% in 2025, and 100% in 2026. If we deal with that first, mover and seconder are okay with that? Thank you.
Okay, so very well. We're now dealing with the First Amendment, the phasing in. Any questions or comments on that point? Then I will call the question. All those in favor of the amendment as it's been presented? Any opposed? That is carried. I now need a mover and seconder. Do we want to have the same movers and seconder? Councillor Carlton, are you agreeable? And Councillor Robinson is also agreeable. Okay, now we'll have discussion on the effective date issue. Right. So any discussion on that? And seeing none, I will call the question. So we're essentially just striking out the effective date piece. So all those in favor? Are there any opposed? That is carried. All right, so we're back to the main motion as amended. I'm learning. This has been one of the most complex meetings that we've had yet. Okay, so you folks understand now I now need a mover and seconder for the main motion as amended. Moved by Councillor Burley, seconded by Councillor Clumpus. Okay, so any discussion on the main motion as amended? Then I'll call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Okay, where are we now? We're on number 8. We do not have any items required for a closed meeting. Item number 9 are 3 bylaws. I need a mover to put those on the floor. Moved by Councillor Robinson, seconded by Councillor O'Leary. Any discussion on those 3 bylaws? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much. We're on now to item number 10, good news and celebrations. I see some guys in hockey jerseys, so they probably have something to say. Councillor Body.
Nope. I'm kidding. We're dressed up in our hockey jerseys today because both of us are heading off to a press conference. early this afternoon with Ron McLean in town, launching the Scotiabank Hockey Day in Canada announcement. I think everyone knows by now that we've been awarded this great event. It'd be something like 10 million viewers that will tune in on the Saturday to showcase our Owen Sound and Grey Bruce community. The dates are January 26th to 29th, 29th being the Saturday. So there's banquets and there's breakfasts and there's meet and greets and there's cocktail parties and alumni hockey games. A lot of NHL and women's Olympic hockey team alumni will be here. It's great to be able to tell our stories of hockey, that we're very rich in stories in Owen Sound and Grey Bruce. And anyone that's interested, go to owensound.ca/hockey. I think that'll probably get you there. I'm not sure if it's Hockey Day in Canada or just hockey. You can get tickets if you're thinking about stuff for family members and especially kids for Christmas. It's a great opportunity. So that's why we're dressed special today, and we're pretty excited about it. And certainly thanks to Bruce Power, who is one of the sponsors, and they're so good to everybody in our Grey Bruce community time after time. So we thank them.
Thank you, Councillor Body. That's congratulations. That's very exciting indeed. Any other good news and celebrations? Okay, then we'll move on to adjournment. Can I get a mover to adjourn, please? Who don't we have? Councillor Milne, Councillor Patterson seconds. Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you. I'm going to suggest that we take a short break